On the third topic that I like to dive into right now, and I'm going to start really making this more of a regular thing. And it's one of those things where, like, I want it to be a community. I really am going to start a community. The name that I've had in the back of my mind for a long time is the Blue Fence Group. You could picture like a fence with like four pillars, and the pillars all have different things to do with our approach to investing and success and things like that. So that's something I'm going to introduce in the future. But for now, you can kind of see this as part of that. But the investing is from a perspective of learning. For myself, I have certain successes that I've had in real estate investing, um, and it's pretty simple. These are things that I've talked about before: buying a property that one person might pass on it, or a lot of people might pass on it because it has low curb appeal, and needs some work to be brought up to modern standards. And most people that are trying to buy a house are just trying to move into a turnkey ready property. That's 9 out of 10 people. And the reason is because most people are just your professionals that are outside of real estate. They don't have time or a desire to really start getting into contracting, and finding contractors, and figuring out if this roof is stable or not, while someone else that has experience, or at least a desire to figure that type of stuff out, can see the value add in a property and get past the lack of curb appeal, and that value add creates a space for equity growth. So that's where my investing experience comes from. But I'm looking to start a community and be part of a community that really shares ideas, and points things out that I don't know, and helps the group figure out ways to grow their portfolio, their finances, so that we can all build up for our families and create more time, and things like that. So on that note, investment strategies. One thing, like I just mentioned, one thing that I can speak to is buying and flipping, right? And I wouldn't say that I necessarily flipped properties, because to me, flipping sounds like something you do where you buy something, you hold it for a very short period of time, and then you sell. What I did was I bought my first home, and when we bought it, it clearly needed a lot of work. It was livable, but it needed a lot of work to be brought up to modern standards. We already had a perspective of what we thought that looked like, and we had already done some estimates on the cost related to that. And then in my mind, I'm like, hey, look, this is an area that's in transition, from, I would say, transition in the sense of like you have you have it becoming more of a desirable area, because you have more young professionals coming up making money. They can't afford other areas. They see people changing properties and like renovating and things like that. And it's geographically in a great area. So to me, there was a lot of upside. I didn't know exactly how quickly that upside could possibly happen. But I saw the upside on that. And I think that whether you're looking at it that in like a short time frame, which might be considered a flip, or a longer time frame where you end up making money on a at a different time frame in the investment, it's still kind of the same concept, but at different time cycles. You have a different investment time cycle, you have a different exit period. So if you are looking at it in a flip sense, right, you're going to look at a property, you're going to say, how much can I purchase it for? um, what's the value add, meaning what's the upside on, like, it is the inside of the property dated? Can I go in and upgrade the kitchen, or is the kitchen already upgraded? If it's already upgraded, what can I really do to the kitchen to create value? Probably nothing. So where's the value add? The value add is because I'm going to add a room, or I'm going to convert this garage into an ADU, or something like that. But you're looking at it in a shorter time frame. So as opposed to thinking what's the equity gain over a 4 or 5 year period, like you would with something that you might plan on living in or holding and renting out, with a flip, you're looking at probably like a 6 month period. You're like, hey, look, if I can flip this property or like renovate it in, the next 90 to 120 days, and then sell after that in another 60 to 100 days, that's 6 to 7 months. That's a way shorter time frame. So you're not really thinking like, hey, is the real estate market going to get, the value going to jump so much in this time frame? You're more looking at what is this property worth at this point if I were to do these upgrades, and then how quickly can I get it back on the market so I can limit my holding cost, right? Like the cost to actually hold the property, the mortgage monthly, whatever maintenance or gardeners you're going to keep monthly, the insurance, all that type of stuff. How can I limit that? Um, so I think for someone that has like a perspective and a concept of how to renovate, repair, um, you know, how to get quotes, how to, I don't want to say necessarily haggle, but how to really know if you're getting the best price on that and really to limit your outgoing while still doing a quality product. I think that the flips, like, flipping a property is a great way to make money. Especially if you are in a high traffic area. When I say high traffic, I mean transaction, right? How many purchases are happening in your area on a monthly basis? If you're in Los Angeles, if you're in the metropolitan area of LA, if you're in like a place like Inglewood, which is like a area close to LA that has a really nice, it's like close to the city, but it's kind of suburban, but it's still city. Um, and I say it's kind of suburban only because it just has like a lot of single family residences, and they're nice craftsman style homes. And a lot of people are going into them and bringing them up to the modern, renovations, going in, redoing stucco, turn into smooth stucco, putting, the hardwood floors are usually throughout a lot of these properties in the LA area, but people will go in and maybe put like new type of hardwood flooring in, open up the kitchens, things like that, and bring it up to modern standards. And I see a lot of those flips happen very often because you are in an area where there's a lot of transactions happening, where you have a property that is already at the modern market, right? Like you already have the property that's already at the market level as far as uh, curb appeal, the interior renovations, things like that. And that one just sold for, let's say, 1.5 million, and then around the corner you have one where the person's lived in there since 1985 or 1995 or whatever the case is, and hasn't brought it up to speed, or not speed, sorry, brought it up to market conditions, and maybe they are older, elderly, moving out of that home or the need of having that home, and now it's changing hands, right? Like a lot of times it's changing hands from the previous generation to their children. Their children really don't have a necessary need to move into the house or necessarily desire to move into the house. So it goes onto the market. And because it's not at current market standards, it gets sold at a lower price. And a lot of times what happens is I'll see these properties go on the market at a higher price, like they're trying to get closer to that current market price because they're like, hey, look, we're in an area where a similar house just sold for 1.5. I know that we're not there, but we'll go. I know that we're not there because we have an old kitchen and we're very dated and there's going to be a lot of renovations needed. But let's say that we're at 1.2, right? And then what will happen is someone still doesn't want to pay that much for a property that needs a lot of work, not because the value is not there, but because they don't want to have to go in and do that work, right? And, come out of pocket with cash and take credit cards or whatever the case is to bring it up to that level. So what will happen is it'll sit on the market, they'll drop the price from 1.2 to 1.15, right? They'll drop it 50K, then they'll drop it another 50K, then they'll drop it another 50K. Next thing you know, the property's at 1,050,000 when, a house around the corner sold for 1.5 million. And now an investor comes in and says, hey, I'll give you 975. Property's been sitting on the market for longer than they want, 6, 7 months, and they are motivated to sell. And keep in mind, a lot of times these people have space in the equity because they bought it so long ago. And depending on what the reason for the sell is, trust me, I'm in a neighborhood that this is happening constantly. And a lot of times it's just the aging out of the owner and not having the family have the desire to take over that property. I've seen it within my own family. Um, Or you have siblings that can't necessarily come to an agreement that, hey, it makes sense to keep the property. Let's figure out a way to make it make sense. And they sell it because someone wants their cash, they want their equity out of it. Makes sense, right? So that's how you end up having an investor coming in. Everyone wants to get the property, so the agent wants to get the property. So there's still equity in there, even at the lower purchase price. They go in at 975. They say, okay, let's go in. We'll take the offer, and they say as is, no credits, nothing, right? Now they're in escrow and they're anxious to get this thing sold and move on. The investor says, hey, look, for us to close on this, we need at least like 50K in credits, because this is old, this is old, this is old. And then the sellers are like, well, you knew this, we told you this. But the investor is still going to go after trying to get some sort of credits. Seller's going to come back with a $25,000 credit out of the 50K credit. Investor's going to come back, say, hey, 35K. Seller's going to come back at 30. Investor will end up probably getting that property that they went into escrow at 975 down to, let's say, 950, maybe 940. That's where the space comes in. And I'm not one to say haggle someone down and try to like rip them off. Don't do that, obviously, right? But at the same time, if you are looking at trying to flip a property, you approach it in a sense of a business, and you try to get the best deal, while your moral character will dictate how you approach things, right? Like, obviously you're not going to do anything like wrong, right? Like illegal, shady, anything like that. But just how your dealings with people. I'm more the type to, I don't really haggle hard. If I think it's a fair price and that's the price that they want, I'll pay that price. If I don't think it's a fair price, I'll say, hey, I think a little bit lower price is fair, or whatever the case is. But it's about fair. It's not me getting over on you. It's not me trying to get more out of the transaction. I think that's just a bad moral way to approach things. And I do that down to like someone doing work on my house. If they say $500 for, hey, I'm going to pick up this big load of stuff that, a lot of times I have to get stuff removed because I'm doing some work, debris, whatever. And they'll say, okay, $500 to remove that stuff. If I think it's fair, I just might be like, okay, $500, no need to haggle. If I feel like they're trying to, start high on me and kind of rip me a little bit, I'll be like, hey, that's a lot, bro. Like, can you do it for 4 or what? Like, I'm not doing it in some sense of trying to haggle you down to the lowest price possible in the world so that you don't make as much as you. I want you to make a good amount, and I don't want to get screwed at the same time, right? I think I'll approach everything like that, buying, properties that are, flips or holds or whatever. This is someone's house. And like, just be fair. Just be fair. Don't be a D word. All right. But that's how you have situations where the investor ends up getting the property for like 940 in an area where homes are selling for 1.5 at a fully renovated amount, or a fully renovated place. So next thing you know, you have 950. He goes into it. Let's say you got 6 months worth of mortgage payments on a hard money loan. Let's say that the mortgage payments are, let's say 7K, 8K, let's say 10K, right? Let's say just 10K. 6 months at 10K, that's 60 grand on top of that 950 that you bought it for. Now you're at 1,010,000. And then let's say it costs you another 150,000 straight cash to bring that property up. 150. So now you're at like $1,160,000. And then let's say that you are able to sell for 1.5. The space there is about $340,000. Maybe you pay real estate commissions for 40K. You walk away with 300K and you get taxed on that, or you 1031 exchange that and you defer the taxes. But there's space there in a lot of areas, right? Especially in areas that have a high transaction rate, areas where the property value is high. You have aging homeowners where their property is a little bit outdated. There's space there, and a strategy that I'm really thinking of. And see, I'm going to share all my jewels. There's no holding back. I'm going to give you the information that I'm working on the property that I own. I think that I'm going to implement this strategy as like a going forward strategy, finding single family residences that you can easily either add an ADU or convert a garage, right? because that's a great way to take a property that's a single family residence and immediately turn it. I won't say immediately, but turn it into a 2 unit property, right? So when you do that, that's a massive value gain along with whatever improvements you would make. The challenge sometimes when you buy an actual 2 unit or a multi-unit property is that you have tenants in there. You're buying at today's market price. The tenants are in there at last year's rental price, or a lot of times a lot further back, right? There was a time frame where I was dealing like exclusively in commercial rental property, and I was reading a lot of rent rolls, and I was calling a lot of sellers of multi-unit properties, 8 units, 10 units, 12 units. And what you found was that it was rare that, especially in rent-controlled areas like Los Angeles, it was rare that the rental income on the property represented represented a supportive income for the purchase price, right? Maybe it's a good cash flow for the current owner because they bought this property many years ago. They've paid their mortgage down. The rent value has continued to go up, right? That's how you end up creating that space. But for the new person coming in, you're going to come in with a situation where on a property where you think you might be able to get 2,500 a month for a unit, the person in there might be paying 1,300. And in order to get them out, you either have to hope that they move, or you have to buy them out, things like that. So it's not always just super simple to buy a multi-unit property and increase the rent. And a lot of times, like even with my tenant, 3 years, no rent increase. And the reason why is because you just end up not wanting to do that. But if you have rental property, you realize that it's also a business, and in order to maintain that property with expenses going up, you do have to have an incremental increases to your rental costs. And that's the only way that you're going to grow your rental income. But obviously, it's just one of those things. Like rent is it's a human thing, right? This isn't like I'm just selling like burgers, where I'm like, hey, well, you don't need this burger. It's like, no, they need their home. So you can't just be super callous with the concept of like, I'm just going to raise your rent. Like, yes, it happens. It makes sense. Your expense as a landlord goes up usually annually. Especially to maintain older properties, you're spending money on that. Things happen. Pipes bust. You got to pay that. When pipes bust, you got to put tenants in hotels. So it's understandable that there is a increase in costs for being a landlord. I'm just saying that unless you are a cold son of a biznatch, then it's just it's not that easy just to be like, yeah, I'm raising your rent this year, and again and again and again. You know what I mean? Like I guess I just have a heart, But I would just say this: you want to do it. It might be better to slowly to do it incrementally as opposed to every once in a while like a big jump. Um, but on the tenant side, that's why I think it's a good thing for tenants to look at rent as like a shorter term thing, because the reality of it is you are renting from someone that has financial obligations related to that property that you might not be aware of that are changing. While you might look at it like, hey, look, don't raise my rent, and they're like, hey, look, it costs $5,000 to fix that pipe that busted last year. Like we either got to sell this or we got to figure out a way to make this make sense. Um, but back to the investing side of it. So that's my perspective on how a flip can work. There's lots of calculators out there that you can use and you can kind of play with and say, okay, if I bought a property here and it cost me this much to hold it and this much to renovate it and this much to sell it, what's my actual profit? And then, like the concept with the ADU, that's what I'm thinking with that property that I currently own. Hey, I'm thinking of converting the garage into an ADU, giving somebody reasonable fair rent for a nice unit there. Hopefully that helps and contributing to solving the housing crisis in LA. And then making a bit of a strategy as I go forward, finding properties where I could literally take that same exact floor plan, so that there's less engineering, less changes to plans every time. Maybe I can go back to the same engineer and say, hey, can you update these plans to this property because I'm using the same floor plan? Figure out a way to save costs while you're doing this. and have a strategy. And I think that it could be a lucrative thing once again, and especially in areas where there's high demand for property, creates high transactions, and makes and creates a market, right? Like the volatility of a market, and the transactions in a market are what creates the spread, right? Because if you can present value within that marketplace, you're going to have more people want to flock to whatever you're offering. So on that note, I didn't say it enough during this video, but go ahead, like and subscribe. 100 years of wealth. Cheers. I hope this year is bringing health and wealth to you, and happiness. I know, not to dive into political stuff, but it's crazy. A lot of changes going on, a lot of wild things. You have to tell me if you think it's good, bad, if you're indifferent, whatever it is. But I hope that things are working out well for you, and everything gonna be all right. But 100 years of wealth. Please like and subscribe.